This is one of my favorite topics, why things are where they are, but I'm going to talk about why animals and plants and environments are where they are. One of the earliest explanations we have for this is the Garden of Eden, where all of these animals and plants were in the same place, implying that all of these habitats were also present. As Europeans explored the continent and developed theories to explain these distributions, we found that, in fact, we can divide the Earth up into broad geographic regions where species following within those regions are more similar to each other by descent or shared evolutionary histories. I'm from western North Carolina, so working from within the Nearctic range there, I was very interested in why things are where they are as a child, probably because I observed my Uncle Clyde catch that large muskie right in front of me, and it became interesting to me, why weren't muskies in mud puddles? Why weren't they in trout streams? Why weren't they in ponds? And so as I became a fish ecologist, I approached this question to answer this question in terms of this particular waterfall impedes the passage of American eels upstream. So there are 4 or 5 species only found below that particular waterfall. This has been a topic that interested me, and I became interested in fish. There's many more species of insects. They're much more interesting than fish. And so as I learned more about these kinds of insects, I realized how much ecology influences where they are. As I learned to tell the insects apart as adults and look at their insect genitalia, which I've heard is obligatory or mentioned in this talk. It became increasingly obvious to me that there are explanations for why things they are also include evolutionary explanations. So a species here I discovered on the lower left hand, you probably can't quite tell the difference between them. It has a very small geographic range in Alabama and Georgia. So why things are where they are, the answer to the question matters on the scale that you're asking, in space and in time. So ecology matters and evolution matters, and depending on particular interest, the answer may lie somewhere in the middle. So for aquatic insects, where I'm from, we have not had glaciers, and these forests have been relatively stable. We have tons and tons of species. When I came to Illinois, I found that that was not necessarily the case. So the project that I'm working on here, we're looking at aquatic insect distributions across this area which has been under ice. And one of the amazing things about being under ice is that it resets the species assemblages back to 0. So we're using computer models to map the distribution and environmental correlates of those distributions of aquatic insects. These are stonefly occurrences across the upper Midwest. And so for any particular species, we can predict their distribution and find which sort of environmental variables explain that distribution best. And if we take the whole assemblage of species, then we have patterns of richness or patterns of diversity across the landscape. We can see which areas have more species, which areas have few species. We can then use those data and those predictions to ask, for example, how well protected area networks might capture regions of exceptionally high diversity. For example, here federal lands. So we can ask, do our federal lands occur in places where we have the highest species richness? Then if we consider that climate change should impact or influence the distribution of these species on the landscape, for example, environments in Illinois may be drier and warmer, and by the mid-century, we can use these models to predict the fate of those insect populations, or where the fate of the suitable habitat for those populations. One result of that kind of landscape shifting is we have suture zones, or areas where dispersal may be constrained, and so organisms stacked up on one side of these sorts of dispersal barriers, and that seems to be the case. There's an animation in there. Well, anyway. So if you're a stonefly, maybe you have to crawl from Tennessee to Manitoba because you can't cross this till plane to find sediment. So our next steps are to extend these models to the other major groups of aquatic insects. And because we believe that the future holds the key to the past, we can use these models to predict what is the fate of fisheries. These are the insects are often the trophic base of fisheries, and also to better adapt our conservation strategies to make sure that we can protect every species. Thank you.